My 9-year-old son won't stop screaming in his room. When I found out the reason, my heart dropped. It was a typical Friday evening, and I was in the kitchen preparing dinner for my family. My wife, Laura, was in the living room grading papers, her life as a middle school teacher seemingly never ending. Our 9-year-old son, Jason, was in his room, playing with his action figures. The comforting sounds of our everyday life filled the house, and for a moment, I felt a sense of contentment. Suddenly, Jason began screaming at the top of his lungs. My heart raced, and I dropped the knife I was holding, rushing towards his room. Laura was right behind me, her face a mask of concern. We had never heard him scream like this before, and our minds raced, imagining the worst. As we reached his room, we found the door locked. I banged on the door, yelling for Jason to let us in. After a few agonizing seconds, the door clicked open, and I stumbled into the room, my eyes scanning for any signs of danger. Jason was standing in the middle of the room, tears streaming down his face, his action figures scattered on the floor. His eyes were wide with fear, and he continued to scream, completely inconsolable. I rushed to him, pulling him into my arms, trying to soothe him. "What's wrong, buddy? What happened?" I asked, my voice shaking. Between sobs, Jason managed to choke out, "I saw something terrible, Dad." It was in the corner, watching me. Laura and I exchanged a worried glance, both of us unsure of what to make of his words. We searched the room, looking for any signs of an intruder or something that could have terrified him. But there was nothing there, just the remnants of a normal day's play. I knelt down in front of Jason, trying to catch his gaze. "Can you tell me what you saw, buddy? We're here to help." He hesitated for a moment, then whispered, "It was a shadow, Dad." But it wasn't just any shadow. It had eyes, and it was watching me. A chill ran down my spine. I wanted to believe it was just a figment of his imagination, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Laura and I decided to let Jason sleep in our room that night, hoping that being close to us would help ease his fears. Over the next few days, Jason refused to go into his room alone. He was convinced that the shadow was still there, waiting for him. Desperate for answers, we sought the help of a therapist, who suggested that it could be a manifestation of some underlying anxiety. We worked with her to help Jason confront his fears, but the shadow seemed to haunt him no matter what we tried. One evening, as I was tucking Jason into bed, he looked up at me with tear-filled eyes. "Dad, I'm scared. I don't want to see it again." My heart broke for him, and I made a silent promise to myself that I would do whatever it took to help him. That night, after Jason had fallen asleep, I sat down at my computer and began searching for anything that could explain what he was experiencing. As I scrolled through pages of articles and forum posts, I stumbled upon a story that made my heart drop. It was eerily similar to what Jason had described, and the comments were filled with others who had experienced the same thing. Most unsettling of all was that many of them claimed that the shadow only appeared to those who were about to face a great tragedy or loss. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a coincidence. Desperate for answers, I decided to reach out to one of the commenters, hoping they could provide some insight. After exchanging a few messages, they suggested that I contact a local paranormal investigator who had helped them in the past. The next day, I made the call, setting up a meeting with the investigator. As I hung up the phone, I knew that I was walking down an uncertain path. But if there was even the slightest chance that it could help my son, I was willing to take that risk. The following week, the paranormal investigator arrived at our home, armed with an array of equipment and a wealth of knowledge. As he began his investigation, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. What if this was just the beginning of something far worse? Hours later, the investigator called us into Jason's room. He had found something, and as he showed us the evidence, my heart dropped. There, hidden in the corner of the room, was an old, sealed-off crawlspace. And inside, the skeletal remains of a child, hidden away for years. The police were called, and an investigation unfolded. The previous owners of our house had lost their child in an accident and, in their grief, had hidden his body in the crawlspace. The shadow that had haunted Jason was a manifestation of the lost child's spirit, trapped and frightened. The discovery shook our family to its core. We mourned the unknown child and the terrible fate that ended him. In the weeks that followed, we worked with the authorities to ensure that the child's remains were properly laid to rest. One night, as I was tucking my son into bed, he said, "Dad, the shadow is gone, but I can't help feeling like we've lost something too."